We're proud to present Seller Sessions live in London, where we'll be flying in some of the world's most advanced Amazon educators. The event will be held at the prestigious David Game Keynote Theatre. Alongside myself will be Evelyn Demirov, who is known for breaking lots of trends on Amazon, Anthony Lee, one of the early innovators of the blast ranking method and published author. We'll also be flying in show favourites Leran Hirschkorn and Paul Harvey. Over the coming weeks, we'll be announcing more speakers and content. So, if you want to join in the fun with other super smart Amazon sellers and brands, then visit sellersessions.com/live and grab super early bird tickets before they go to full admission. We'd like to say a big thank you to all of our media partners, which include GS1 UK, Web Retailer, River Cleaner, Sixleaf, Orange Click, and Amazing Freedom. We look forward to seeing you all in London on June 1st. Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Again, I bring back Kian Golzari. How you doing?
All good, Danny. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty heavy duty, the last one. Lots of information in there. As I said, it's quite in depth, so that will be included in the show notes. So I wanted to do a follow-up podcast with you because I want to talk about, discuss the comparison between Amazon sellers and retail and how they leverage factories, partnerships, etc. Now let's talk about getting Amazon sellers into the retail stores, you know, the Holy Grail in effect. So let's start with, when is a seller actually ready?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think you need to make the decision if you are ready to supply one of these big retailers, because consider that when supplying one of these major retailers, you have to hold a lot of stock for them and you have to take on a massive financial burden. And as we sort of discussed in the last podcast, you have to really be comfortable giving 180 days worth of credit, and all the liability, all the returns, all the cancellations are going to be passed on to you. They have very strict testing requirements. So if you're not in full tune with your industry and your business, you shouldn't even consider approaching a retailer. But if you feel that you've reached a certain size where you think you can handle all these sort of things, then you can sort of start to think about it.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's talk about the product market fit to the retailer, i.e. what you're selling and the relevance there, and trying to make that work.
Yeah, I mean, just remember, like when you're working with a retailer, you're just trying to convince the buyer that they should stock your product. But remember that every buyer for every different brand is different and likes to work in different ways. So how you reach out to them is going to be different through different multi-channels, like either finding them through LinkedIn, through email, or sending them phone calls, text messages, etc. And it's really important that you tell a story as well. So you want to say who you are, why you're successful, and why it'll be successful for that retailer. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if you're selling the same stuff as everyone else, then you don't have a chance. You have to offer something to them or provide something to them that no one else does that's of unique value, that makes them, pay attention to you, because these guys get pitched every single day with hundreds of different products. And if it's all the same stuff, they're not interested. And it's almost like they blur it out, like they just drown it out. So you have to really be unique in your approach and unique in what you're offering.
Yeah, so that brings me on to the difference between one store and another in terms of the negotiations.
Yeah, I mean, just as I said before, just consider that all stores are not the same. So Bed Bath & Beyond are going to be very different to Walmart. Their pricing, their customers, their products, their packaging, they're all going to be different. And you need to adapt yourself to those retailers' needs. So one way that you can make life easier for the buyer is basically go into the store, take photos of the shelf display, make illustration drawings of how your product would look on that shelf, so the buyer can actually visualize how your product will look in the store, and they'll appreciate your efforts that you've gone to not only come up with the product and the price, but also doing their job of showing how it will look like in the store. And then just remember, you always have to do the buyer's job for them. So basically buy your competitor samples, make sure you're better, show that you're cheaper, like whatever the product is, show that you're offering more features or more value than what you're currently stocking, so you can make a very quick decision for them. If you give them a sample and just give them a price, then that sample and price is going to be lost amongst 100 other samples that they receive. So you have to tell them the story and basically convince them and make them feel that they're dealing with a specialist, so they don't really have to worry about anything else. They can sort of pass that off to you.
Yeah, so networking with buyers is key. You know, talk me a bit about that, because at the end of the day, people want to do business with people, one, they like, and two, that they trust. So you want to be able to get beyond the inbox. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting because like with all these different retailers, they all have like different buyers that come in all different shapes and sizes. So sometimes you're dealing with a sort of young early 20s, like hipster, and sometimes you're dealing with a 60-year-old old school buyer. So you kind of need to know like who you're dealing with and understand like what's their objective and what do they need and how do they work. Do your research. As I said, that buyers are very busy people with many different products to look after. But if you can do as much as their job as possible, then they're more inclined to work with you. So as I said, sort of visit their website, go to their store, see what they're selling, look at their range as a whole, and then offer them what they're missing basically, and show them why your product fits for them.
Yeah.
But it's actually quite funny because like buyers are quite limited to how much networking they can do, because obviously buyers are placed in a position of responsibility with so much buying power that often they can get like offered things like under the table. So
yeah,
because of that, buyers actually get switched normally every 6 months. So it's really hard to build up a relationship with a certain buyer. So like when we're dealing with the buyer of like camping and outdoor, we meet them a couple of times, we start to build up that relationship, and then we get an email to say, oh, I'm off now, I'm now the buyer for pet food. And then someone completely new comes in, and then you have to go through that whole process again of getting to know them. 6 months later, they're in another category. So it's
That's
important to have that good relationship, but they don't last very long. But then it's important to maintain those relationships, because they're also passing on a good word about you and your business to the next buyer.
And also, you may be able to connect with them further down the line if they've moved to a different area of sales, and you take on a new client, or you end up getting into that line of products. Then you can revisit that area with them because that's under their niche. Yeah,
and that's a very good point. And often buyers can also change companies. So someone who is the buyer for like Argos or Tesco might become the buyer for Asda. And then we're like, oh, I remember when I was dealing with them in my previous company, so I'm going to make sure I deal with them in my new company. So buyers make your life miserable sometimes, and it's so important not to lose your cool, because there's been times when you want to scream at them down the phone, you want to throw your laptop against the wall, whatever. We just have to keep it together, because that you're going to have to deal with them maybe through another company or a later date. So just always keep it together.
Be careful you kick on your way up, as they say.
Exactly.
So how do you choose the right retail partner? Because obviously you don't want to over push to someone who's not going to be a fit, especially with what's at stake.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good point, because as an Amazon seller, you might just be doing one product or 5 products, but there's going to be certain retailers that fit for you and certain ones who don't. So don't always push your product to a retailer that you don't think is where the product isn't right for them, because if you push something to them that doesn't sell, then you've lost their trust and they won't value your opinion, and they'll never go back to you if they've ordered something from you and it doesn't sell.
Yeah. It's embarrassing for them, but you're paying for it all, because it all comes back on you anyway when it doesn't sell through, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, depending on the terms, because sometimes they can put hidden things in the contract that for whatever doesn't sell comes back to you. And that's also, it's really important to understand the size of your business to know if that's going to be okay or not. Because if you're Coca-Cola and they return 1 million Coke cans to you, then you have another avenue to sell that. But if you don't have another platform to sell, then that's a lot of stock to have.
Well, it's like Amazon, that people get suspended and don't get back on, and they've got 15,000 units tied up. It can be devastating to the business. So in terms of getting their attention now, let's go back to the emails. We know about these switching over. Have you seen anything where little tips and tricks that people can get the attention?
Yeah, I mean, just remember that these retailers get emailed every single day with constant pitches, and it can be very, very overwhelming. And we're in an era of over email saturation. So, Danny, how many emails did you receive today?
Me, probably 200 across 7 to 9 email accounts.
Exactly, and buyers are 10 times worse. So therefore, get straight to the point. Don't paint this massive, beautiful email of your history and your personal journey. They don't care about any of that sort of stuff. Just stand out by being important, offer something of value to them, and make sure your message is clean and focused. The best relationships I've seen have been the ones which have been multi-channel. So across phone calls, emails, sending samples, handwritten notes. And then if you have the relationship with the buyer, then text messages, all that sort of stuff. Just use different platforms to get their attention, because if you only use email, then you're drowned out by all the other emails. But if you have different avenues where you can communicate with them, then use that as well. Everyone's different, so all buyers don't think the same way. They don't communicate on the same channels. So just kind of use what best suits them.
Yeah. All right. So switching tack slightly, let's talk about, rather than the ownership side, let's talk about licensing as a strategy. So what's the best thing about licensing, in terms of it opening doors?
Yeah, I think, licensing is fantastic for getting you meetings that you might not have got before if you didn't have a certain license. So, for example, we got the London 2012 Olympics license, and as a result of being an official licensee of the Olympics, we were then going to have meetings with Argos, Tesco, Sainsbury's, all that, and it would have been very difficult to get those meetings had we not had that license.
Yeah.
And the first half of the meeting started off with, "Oh, here's our licensed product. Here's what we can offer you for the Olympics. Oh, by the way, we also have a brand for camping and outdoor. Here are our camping and outdoor products." Mm-hmm. And then the retailers started off by selecting several items, trial orders, and then year after year, that business just grew. It went from 5 figures to 6 to 7 figures. So we never would have got that meeting without a license. So license can be good in many different ways. One, for opening doors, but also, you've got very, very different licenses to consider. You've got like Star Wars, Marvel, Disney, NBA, NFL, and there's an established market for all of those different licenses. So if you're able to put a reputable license on your product, then you're opening up yourself to like a massive customer base.
Yeah, and obviously licensings are done by territories as well, so that is having that level of availability. So let's talk to me about what are some of the key challenges here?
Yeah, I mean, licensing is a very big responsibility because you've essentially been entrusted with the licenses to represent them with your quality and your manufacturing. Which can be quite costly. The other thing is, like, we have the NBA license, so we partner with many different NBA teams, and you have to represent that team the way that they want to. So they have their own approval process. So you have to go through their development cycle, talk to their buyers, and sort of send samples to them. Many, many different people you have to go through. And then also, like, once you have the license, you also have to create distribution. So you have the perfect product at the perfect price. But if you don't have the distribution, if you don't have the retailer contacts, then you can't necessarily bring in that sort of payment that you've made for the minimum guarantee. Yeah. You're also under the clock as a licensee because you have to pay your license every single year. So that's a lot of pressure. That it's almost like a year time clock every year to basically bring in a certain amount of sales to cover your licensing costs.
That makes sense. So let's talk about some of the benefits here.
Yeah, well, I think the main benefit, as I sort of said before, was that it opens a lot of doors with sort of maybe retailers that would have been difficult to get a meeting with before. But then the other thing is it can really turbocharge your business if you have a product that already works. But then if you add on a licensed logo, which there's a massive fan base for all of a sudden, then you're really going to amplify your sales. But yeah, a good strategy would be to have like proof of concept that the product actually sells, and you have all the sales channels in place and set up. So when you just add that license to increase your sales volume, you also have to make sure it's a license that makes sense for you. So basically, like if you're selling beer bottle holders, then the Disney license doesn't make any sense. But there are certain licenses that fit very, very well for the product that you're offering. So just make sure you align yourself with those certain licenses and go after those ones so you can make the biggest impact.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of paperwork, a lot of admin and stuff. So I'm taking licensing isn't for everyone. You've got a lot of entrepreneurs who are involved in the Amazon space. They've learned everything on the job, if you like. So there's a technical level to licensing. So do you want to go in to explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to consider for yourself, would having a license for your product be a game changer for your business and for the consumer purchasing it? If it really doesn't add much value to your product or to your consumer, then maybe it's not for you. Then also, there's only a very select number of licensees, so they're not just looking for another company to offer another item. Like, if you go to the NBA and say, oh, I want to do like a mug, a coffee mug with this team's logo on it, they've already got loads of licensees for that. So they're looking for unique opportunities. So just make sure you position yourself as unique as possible. I would also just sort of add, financially, you have to be ready to sign up for the licensing model. You have to be sure that you can make your return on your investment. And you have to do that by basically having those retail channels already set up in place by supplying them already, or have in mind which retailers you can sell into once you get that license.
Cool. Before we wrap, let's talk about how you can get into the license. How do you get them?
Sure. I mean, it's kind of similar to how you would approach retailers as well. You can find the license holders through using different channels like LinkedIn and whatnot. Luckily, in my sort of experience, like licensors have come to us, but essentially, like, once you get that initial meeting, they want to see that you have a solid business infrastructure with good accounts. in place in order to get a license, because they want to make sure that you can finance their business and have the proper team in place to run the business of a license.
Yeah.
And also you must have a very good accounting department, because essentially you have to report your royalties, because, you know, they will get a certain percentage of your sales as a result of using their license. So if you don't have a good accounting department in place, then you don't really have a good reporting structure to show how much they're due to be paid. So you also have to have a lot of money for insurance, as you're now liable for their brand. And if anything goes wrong as a result of your manufacturing or your positioning of their brand, then you have to cover it. So that can be quite costly. And similar, you have to find, basically just find the licensee holder. As I mentioned, similar to how you find a retailer, make phone calls, send letters. It's not easy, but persistence definitely pays off.
But things like if you're out networking, that's the type of thing where you organically build these kind of relationships and get into them. Yeah,
definitely. And I think also, as I said before, like being good in the license game, then other licensees or other licensors will seek you out. So for example, like currently we've got the NBA license, and we were at a trade show, and then I got approached by NASCAR, who said, you know, I love the stuff you're doing with the NBA. I'd also like you to do this for NASCAR and basically supply this into your existing retail channels. Also, FC Barcelona, the soccer club, approached us and said, can you do everything you're doing for the US retailers with our license? Because essentially they're just sort of using you and your business model to increase their sales and increase their exposure. So if you're already doing a good job, then licensors will seek you out. And I think another really good avenue to find these people are at trade shows. I just did the sport and license tailgate show in Las Vegas, which was in the beginning of January. And there you sort of see all the other licensees, you get ideas, you get an understanding of what's going on in the market. And then you also meet with all the buyers. If you have a booth there, they'll come and visit you and you can discuss business there.
Makes sense. Well, let's pause it there. We've covered a huge amount again. What you got coming up? You're off to China. You're back over there again soon, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I just spent 6 weeks in the States working on the whole NBA business and that license show. I'm back in the UK just now. Edinburgh, Scotland is where I'm from. And then I'll be back in the States in March, and in April and May I'll be in China as part of China Magic. Yeah. So yeah, it's fun.
Excellent. And what's the best way of reaching it? Email, etc.?
Yeah, email's fine, which is kian.golzari@gmail.com. But the other thing is I'm very active on Instagram. I post a lot of stuff from like when I'm doing these trade shows and visiting factories and things like that. So if you want to check me out on Instagram, it's just Kian, Kian _JG. And
great.
Drop me a message there if you want to chat.
Sounds good. Thanks for joining us, mate. It's been a pleasure again. We'll get you back in the future. Guys, don't forget June 1st in London, Seller Sessions Live. We still have tickets available, which is at sellersessions.com/live. And I'll see you again in the next few days. Take care.